Hello and welcome back to the show that has no name, no title, no real release schedule, but I really want to release this today so it doesn't bleed on to next week's schedule. And I really don't have anything to talk about. As you can hear in my voice, I am super duper sleepy, but I gotta pump this out for the end of the day. So, what am I going to talk about? I think I'm going to talk about one interesting interview experience I had since I'm still looking for work. I'm still on the grind in that sense. And one of the interview experiences I had recently was just plain retarded. Really, it was quite a frustrating one. It's really not good when your interviewer thinks that they know more than they do. And yeah, I will get into the story. So, right on the screen, I actually have some of the questions that I was asked. If anything, I actually think that this is the entire question sheet that, or rather, this is the entire transcript. I don't know how to put it, but these are all the questions I was asked. So it's a transcript of the questions he asked me, but I didn't include my answers because I don't really care about that. I think just document what questions are asked, a bit more interesting. You get your standard questions such as walk me through your um, resume, and he asked about any specific apps I had published. Um, Now this is the first question that rung alarm bells because like you should have read through my CV as an interviewer. I mean, obviously, why interview me if you hadn't read through my CV? And this wasn't like the first round. Like I had a interview with a recruiter before that and had to do a pretty extensively long coding challenge. It was a long one. So at this point, I've already dumped in hours of my time into this interview process. At least you could have done is at least briefly look through my CV, and on my CV it clearly shows I'd only like worked at pretty large companies that it's very unlikely that I would have been the person to set up like actually deploying the app to the Play Store. But maybe, that's just him just asking a generic question he asks everybody. But one look at my CV, you wouldn't waste interview time by asking a question like that. It's pretty obvious that I hadn't done any of that. So then the first technical question was like, tell me about activities. And like that threw me again because it's kind of like, I guess a good example is turning up to an interview, let's say for a maths position, and the interviewer says, all right, so tell me about addition. Like, and you just think, what do you want to know? Like, what are you trying to get out of this question? Like, I don't really like these ambiguous bait type questions where they're like, oh, yeah, no, I just want to know what you think about it. Because it's like complete bullshit. This isn't a creative style work, or you're not trying to hire a novelist to get their whimsical views or worldview about some stupidly redundant piece of information. This is a technical job, but a fairly senior one, but at the same time, just grunt work, just putting in the hours, doing the tasks. Like, why do you need to know about my worldview philosophy about activity, which is essentially just one of the base pieces, one of the base things you code in Android. It's such a redundantly stupid question. Um, so then he asked like how many activities did I had have in the OLG app, which is the last app I was working on. Like, tell me about the life cycle of that activity. Like, these are all pretty stupidly like low level like questions. Like the best way to put it is that these are all questions you can imagine asking a junior or something, and you're only doing that because you have no better way of testing a junior because you have no brain to be able to test people effectively or select for them effectively for how they can do the job. Like you're just like, oh, I don't know. I'm just gonna throw in a random quiz, like a trivia quiz, but an Android engineering trivia quiz, which is a stupid way to assess if someone can actually do the job or not. But then things got worse. They really did get worse. And one question that was like quite stupid was is did you use espresso on your projects? Well, this is essentially a testing tool that lets you simulate being a user. So you can write code that lets you essentially pretend being a user to test out if the app works, which is pretty handy because then you don't have to test out yourself. You let the code do it itself. And through answering that, mention that and but personally I haven't used it much because our our dedicated testers use tools like Selenium. So then he asked, "Oh, what is Selenium? What can you test with Selenium?" And I pretty much said like the same things that you would test with Espresso, an Android app, but Selenium is a general purpose tool that can test pretty much anything you throw at it. It could like test browsers as well, web apps, stuff like that, iOS apps. It's just a lot more general tool. So then he went on to say that, oh, Selenium is normally for stress tests and Espresso is for UI testing. I'm like, what the fuck, this moron? It's like, no, Selenium can be used for stress testing, but it is not a tool for stress testing. Like it's not specifically for that. It can be used for that, but it's not for that. So I have an interview basically injecting nonsense into my brain right there. But what really pissed me off, it was like these following questions. He asked, have you worked with OAuth 2? And I said, yeah, I've worked with OAuth 2. But yeah, I haven't specifically had to use it on the projects I've been working on very much. And he was like, oh, but why? Do you not care about how your users are signing in then or how they're being authenticated? And OAuth 2 is a specific way for you to sign in as a user. It's a very technical detail. And this moron thought that OAuth 2 was like particularly more secure than essentially a different style called like sessions. And it's just like nonsense. Like sessions have been around way longer than OAuth 2. They've been completely fine, completely secure. Typically not something an Android engineer would ever need to worry about, but since I've got experience in backend development, which is, writing the servers, writing code for the servers, that your Android apps and your web apps connect to. So you can do all those login stuff or storing all the data, just all that kind of shit. Since I can do that stuff as well, I just felt like schooling him a bit. But like what really did bug me is he asked me like, oh, so how do you deal with deadlocks in a database? And like I was like, what? Like at this point, imagine that you're applying for a job as what's a good example? uh this is a McDonald's, sir. It's just sort of like that. Applying for a job at McDonald's and they start asking you astrophysics questions. I was like, wait, what? Like, did I turn up to the wrong interview or something? It's kind of like that. Interestingly enough, I knew a lot about this kind of stuff. I knew a lot more about it than him, so I explained that that's not something Android engineers should be concerned with. And not just for knowledge reasons, for logistical reasons. Like, it's not in their domain, it's not in their job, it's not something that they could possibly deal with even if they wanted to, because it's not where they work. Like, that's for a completely different team to work on. So then he's like, oh yeah, but if you had a local SQL database, and I said, well, that's not possible because you would have done something horribly wrong with your application. It's not possible to deadlock your own local database without doing something horribly stupid. Anyway, like, I've rambled on a long time, and like this episode's got to get out, but it was just a stupidly it's just such a stupid interview, honestly. Like, the guy was a moron who was interviewing me. Um, so these are all the questions I was asked. I answered all of them almost perfectly. I still didn't get through. Just to put things into perspective, like, usually when I get like an interview, if I answer stuff pretty convincingly, like 80 to 90%, then I'll usually go through to the next round at least, and I would usually get asked about a quarter of the questions. But here, I was asked 4 times the questions, answered all of them pretty flawlessly, and still didn't get through because maybe of my, bit of personality clashing with his, where I'm a bit disagreeable, and if someone says something, it's even an interview that's fucking stupid, like, I'm gonna correct them. It's probably not what they want to hear, but at the same time, it's like, well, don't ask me questions that you don't know the answers to yourself. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, what am I here for? Like, why the fuck would I be your subordinate? Like, that's just bullshit. Anyway, I'm tired, a bit bitter. I better wrap this up. Next episode will be, um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe something more lighthearted. We'll see. Catch you next time. Bye.